Hey everybody, welcome back to Is It a Buy, where we talk about stocks and try to determine if they are with a buy or maybe a pass. My name is Corey. I just like to preface the video by saying I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy who likes to talk about stocks. So please take what I say with a grain of salt, all right? I got a little tripped up there. I was excited. We do have user A Tobit here, my buddy Austin, and I was going to say we're not financial advisors. I'm sure he's not a financial advisor either. So just keep that in mind, guys. I was able to get him on camera this time. I did remember to do that. So fantastic. Austin, so happy to have you, my friend.
Yeah, glad to be back. Glad to be back. Big news.
Awesome. Yes, big news. So before we get into it, let's go over, I guess, some prerequisites and kind of like your background just a little bit, since we did cover it in the last video.
Yeah. Little refresher. So my name is A Tobit on Reddit, and I posted a couple of things that really started to shake things up. Citadel has no close, everything's short, and Blackrock bag holders arguably as well. So my background is in accounting. I have a master's in accounting, and the dirt when it comes to Citadel is just unreal. So they have just ungodly amounts of influence over the entirety of the financial market, and a lot of the stuff they're doing is very shady. So this was actually covered in a post that we did for Everything Short when we did our last live stream. So it's a continuation of that, where we found a securities violation. It took some time to go through and research it, and I think it's going to be actually bigger than a lot of people expected. It's just more dirt on top of the company that's been really in the limelight of this. So I'm really looking forward to covering it. I do want to say the last post that we were covering, there was a blip in there pointed out by Alexis Goldstein in a conversation I had with her about BlackRock purchasing bonds. So BlackRock ended up purchasing corporate bonds, and basically they just weren't U.S. Treasuries. So while that does not pull the rug out from the argument, I mean, they're definitely still shorting bonds. BlackRock's just not supplying them, which would have been really cool if you could make that connection. But this is what this is all about, is figuring out what sticks and what doesn't. So yeah, really excited to be here, man. Really excited to go through this.
Yeah, awesome. So I think you already covered it, but yeah, we you had seen this whenever we were looking at the Finra violations, and you said, I'll never forget it. You were like, holy smokes, like this might be something. And so it looks like you looked into it, and I can't wait to see what you have. So I'll let you get to it.
Yeah, man. So I appreciate it. Okay, so Corey and I were just kind of doing some research on how I go through this DD process and where I'm gathering my info from. And this is from Finra.org. It's Finra broker check, and it lists out all of these violations on different entities, whether it's various market makers and stuff. And we just came across this new violation where we're going to dive into a little more detail here, but it was basically concerning a Treasury's violation. So the irony of the situation was we had just done a cover of the Everything Short, and I'm basically calling out Citadel for shorting the Treasury bond, and then immediately find out that they get slapped with these Treasury securities violations. So I dove into that and started coming up with some really, really crazy things that when you start tying everything in, they just really start to make sense. So without reading this, I mean, word for word, verbatim, what I'm going to do is take this moment to address this first section. These are definitely prerequisite DDs that you need to read in order to understand this. And they're just from my previous posts, as this is a continuation. So the too long did not read is saying that I've prepared a case which strongly indicates that Citadel Securities, along with its affiliates, are committing securities fraud. Now, I believe, like a lot of people are going to say, whoa, but I genuinely believe that. There's a very high likelihood of that through this, and I'll explain why. So on March 26, 2021, Finra released a new citation against Citadel Securities for nearly 2 years worth of securities violations. This was between July 2017 and October 2019. The only reason Citadel hasn't been busted for fraud is because they hide behind the veil of unintentional behavior. So every time they get a violation, at the end of that violation, there's usually a disclosure about they unintentionally removed logic in their system, or they were unaware that this issue was happening, and then they took the steps to fix it. But time and time again, year after year, it's the same stuff over and over again. So had it not been for that, these people would have been busted for fraud. So it's time for all of them to be held accountable. And walking through this post as an auditor, I'm not an auditor. I don't have a CPA. but in school you're taught the portrayal of the audit, and that's what we discussed last time in the Everything Short. You're looking for the fraud triangle. Where do they have pressure to maybe report things that they should report next quarter, maybe to accelerate those? Where do they have the motivation to do that, and where do they have the opportunity? So without diving into that first, I do need to take the time to address this, because a lot of people have been asking why these Citadel posts are related to GameStop. Now, perhaps I have lost sight of this connection, so I do want to take the time to free that up. Now, as Don't Fight the Vol has posted, and this is Alexis Goldstein, for those of you that don't know, she's coming at this from the regulator side, and she's advocating for change and transparency in the hedge fund reporting world. And to her statement, you really don't know what a company's short position is, because they're not required to disclose it. Plain and simple. And unfortunately, she's right. So what we can do, however, is look for these breadcrumbs, right? If there's all of this stuff falling out around them, then we can make a pretty good indication or pretty good conclusion that, man, a lot of stuff around you is breaking. What's going on with you? So I hope I've done a good job of revealing the evidence of their ever-tightening noose. To name a few big ones, as discussed in a lot of these other posts: the Finra violations for naked shorting. This is all coming from Citadel has no close. The naked shorting, failure to post a short sale indicator on transactions, which means they push a transaction through and they don't indicate it that's short sale, so it just looks like it's a regular stock market transaction. Also, withholding large customer orders to lower the market price. They've been caught doing this, where they take thousands, if not millions, of shares and they prevent them from going through, so it drags the bid down to meet that new level, and it's just blatant market manipulation. So furthermore, when you look at their balance sheets, this is going to the Everything Short, the rehypothecated assets for both Treasury and equity securities, especially the growth in 2020, and then the liabilities, as their promises to keep repaying those continue to increase, those liabilities start building on the balance sheet, and we saw a 100% jump from 2019 to 2020. Furthermore, every time they get this citation, as I've noticed, Finra voices this concern with a lack of preventative measures. You guys didn't have the right controls in place to prevent this from happening. You had logic in your system that has now been removed, and so we're receiving these Treasury transactions when we shouldn't be. And then the number of times they've been documented for accidentally removing that logic, it's almost laughable. So as far as Citadel is concerned, everything fits within all corners of this fraud circle, this fraud triangle, excuse me. And they do it to make a few $1 million, because they know the fine is just going to be a small tax when they're paying a couple $100,000 after making a few million. The incentive there, or the opportunity, especially with this, for them to commit these acts is just apparent. So this is really getting into kind of the gist of all of this surrounding GameStop. And I do feel good reading this word for word. So for far too long, people with money have been draining the wealth out of the global economy. So everything around us becomes more expensive, and the power to do anything about it decreases. We are forced to think about pinching pennies just to make ends meet, while there are people benefiting from all of this injustice, and that's the ultra wealthy. This aggregation of wealth has been going on behind the scenes for centuries. Slowly and gradually, we are like essentially a frog sitting in a pot of boiling water, to the point where we don't notice the gradual uptick in inflation. Debt has basically been designed to carry for life. So I know many of you out there listening to this are going to realize and be able to relate to that. Now, the elitist mentality here is their confidence and greed has reached a level so high that it should have been impossible for them to fail in their bet against GameStop. And the only thing that could have blown their victory is if we all started listening to one another, and most importantly, learning. So GameStop, as well as other heavily shorted positions, I prefer to talk just solely about GameStop because of the massive amount of short position that was outstanding. And so most importantly, learn we did, right? We sat down at the World Series of Poker with Doyle Brunson, we called the bluff, and we won. And all we have to do to prove that we won is just to continue holding. So GameStop is this linchpin, right? If people are worried here about how to reallocate wealth down here at the bottom, what they don't realize is all the wealth is up here. It's in this sector that you don't see on a day-to-day. And GameStop represents this linchpin where they are now exposed to a limitless and immediate transfer of wealth back to the 99%. a short position of this magnitude being called, people don't really realize what it means to have an unlimited loss. But that is the gravity of the situation. It is very much the linchpin. GameStop is the does open the floodgates, and GameStop is our checkmate. So, as the best way for me to say it is, GameStop is our hedge against the funds. So I hope that I've been able to kind of clear that up, and why Citadel is so important and they're such a big player. Is that no, we're not going to know what anybody's short positions are, but the reality of the situation is, we know based on these things that I'm posting and that other people in DD are posting, is that they have unimaginable liabilities that are still surrounding their short positions. And there's absolutely no possible way that they could have covered. So with that being said, diving into this violation that just kind of proves and continues to prove just how massive this whole thing is within the market, and how pervasive these issues are in the market. So after calling out Citadel for shorting treasuries, we find that there was another violation on 3/25/2021. So yeah, seriously. This wasn't something I've already covered with you. This wasn't something I was searching for. You and I walked through this, and it was posted in the first interview there. These violations occurred between 2017 and 2019 of October. Now, interestingly, at this time, the Fed was began tapering their program to start kind of increasing rates a little bit, and to see if they could start recalling in some of that money that had been pumped out into the economy. Now, the also another important thing to note here is the reason why Citadel is receiving this Treasury security violation is because Finra implemented this change a few months before this happened. So they have these 58 violations for equity securities, right? So the stock market. But this is the very first time they've received a Treasury security violation. And what's interesting is it was implemented in a time right before the Fed started their QE program to try and open up the disclosures and open up the transparency behind the securities market. And second is the implication that has with, you started to conform to this regulation and immediately started failing it. So it's like this had to have been going on for a long time prior to this, because they give you plenty of time for heads up to say, okay, we're going to be implementing this. You need to make sure these systems are ready, so when we start reporting, you're compliant. And it was like immediately after they implemented this, they started to fail these violations. So I'm just going to walk through the overall main disclosure, and then go into like the detailed disclosure, and then tie that back into how Citadel is really dancing around within these loopholes to make it seem like everything is okay.
Right. Really quick, Austin, sorry to interrupt. If you scroll up just a tad, go to the 27th. So from July 2017 to October 2019, the first one. Tapering, which program were they tapering?
So this is the QE program. So the Fed was pumping all of this free money into the economy since like 2008, and they tried to start a QE tapering program in 2018. And there are quotes like Janet Yellen was talking about this being like a watching paint dry type thing. Like, you're not going to see anything react in the market, and the opposite happened. Like, the market just froze, and it's because the Fed started to ease off on the quantitative easing. So they've been pushing all this free money into the system, and now they start to say, okay, it's about time for us. We think the economy is back to where we can start raising rates a little bit. And the second they started to raise rates, it just had a completely opposite effect. And so that, at the same time as this new securities regulation with like as far as their disclosures having to meet these new disclosures, was kind of a double whammy. And personally, I believe because we saw that repo rate spike to 10% in September of 2019, like, just these are just lining up to be like, this had to have had an effect to put increased pressure on these companies to, like, you're reporting this amount of income and revenue from treasury transactions, and then now you are starting to be exposed to, or now Finra is slapping something on the table that says you might have to start cutting that BS out. And so they're trying to find a way continue making as much money as they were while meeting the compliance for it. And so as that came to a head, I believe in 2019, that also played a factor in terms of the liquidity being available. But you know, that's more speculation.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So so this violation is really broken down into three things. Okay. So the first three are up here. 1, 2, 3. I've bullet pointed them here. One is incorrectly reporting internal transfers as treasury transactions. Okay, it is as bad as it sounds. So the 2 is failing to append the remuneration. God, I've said it so many times today. No remuneration indicator to trace reports for certain transactions between affiliates. And 3 is failing to include the correct contraparty type to its trace reports for certain affiliates. And so I'm going to break down all 3 of those. The biggest thing that I take away is actually the last sentence involved here, which is in all cases, the incorrect trace reports involved internal position transfers or transactions with affiliates and did not involve transactions with clients. So we're saying like this is an entity operating within itself and recording those operations as sales. If that sounds anything kind of like what Lehman Brothers was doing in 2008 with repos, it's not exactly the same, but they're accounting things as sales that shouldn't be accounted for as sales. So, and furthermore, this right here just kind of goes to an attestation for, because its supervisory system, including written supervisory procedures or WSPs, was not reasonably designed to achieve compliance with trace reporting rules because it could not detect violations that would generate automatic alerts. It's just every time you read these violations, it is the same cover story for all this is saying is that it was not maliciously done, but it's just a story, right? It's just a story.
Right. So each time it's always saying it wasn't maliciously done, but it happens over. Did that particular one happen was that all 58 times? Or are you sure if it, or
we can go through there, and this really won't take a lot of time. I want to make sure that we can still see I have it up here.
Yeah, because I guess while you look for that, I guess what I'm getting at is, while it's not malicious, quote unquote, it seems like, well, they're not even fixing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just
exactly.
So
exactly.
What's the incentive for them to fix it? They've, as we've heard in the congressional hearings, they were literally working these fines into their cost of doing business, and they don't have any kind of incentive to stop. It's
exactly right. And it usually starts off at the very top without admitting or denying the findings. Every time, without admitting or denying it. They're literally just doing this in a process. Like, the legal fees to try and fight this would be more expensive because they know they're going to fail. So they just pay the fine.
Would it let you copy that, and then you can Control F and see how many times it shows up on the page?
Yeah. Whoops. I'm just going to say without admitting. Without admitting or denying appears 123 times on this page.
Right, and this is all of their...
These are just Citadels. They only have 58 violations.
Jeez.
So they are saying this sentence more than one time in each post. So on top of that, look, here you go. I just pulled one at random, man. Additionally, during the review period, Citadel Securities failed to establish, maintain, and enforce adequate supervisory systems along with a written supervisory. I mean, you can it's Russian roulette. You can go through here and just say, let's pick this one. Admitting or denying allegations, without admitting or denying allegations. So you get the point.
Yeah, it's like they have a template. Like whenever they...
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it.
We'll just go ahead and we'll just throw this one on there.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it's like. So yeah, I mean, you just the list just keeps going on and on. So so what does that bring us back down here? So breaking those 3 things out, and then the biggest one was none of these transactions even revolved around clients. They were all internal transfers. So I'm going to briefly touch on what it means to be involved in a related party transaction because it's significant. And and basically all of these are coming from the codification, which is the Bible, the accounting Bible for Financial Accounting Standards Board, which is FASB. It's like a $1,200 subscription each year, and I would love to have it because this would be like checkmate. I could go through here and literally say, like, no, there's the right way to do this, and then there's this way. But basically, what that is saying, the overview of related party disclosures is it can be basically anybody as long as they have a connection with the entity. So if you, it's pretty vague, to be honest. A parent entity and its subsidiaries. Subsidiaries of a common parent, which is Citadel. Citadel ultimately boils up into Citadel Advisors or Citadel of Americas as the common parent, controlling all of these like tentacles of the octopus. So that, yeah, then the very bottom here is affiliates, and affiliates is really the most vague of these descriptions because how do you not say you're affiliated with someone? You know, you can have just a small ownership of stock in a company and find a way to be considered an affiliate. And then transactions here obviously are not too hard to. I mean, there's no significant. It's just sales, purchases of stuff that you own, real tangible assets, or services that you're receiving, furnishing, borrowings, loans, stuff like that. So you can have loan transactions, whatnot. Now, this is the biggest thing about this entire post, really, is discussing what the implication of a related party means. So in accounting, the biggest concern is that a relationship is materially affecting the way that business is conducted between those two people. You should disclose situations where subsidiaries are conducting transactions with the parent entity. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. If you're I don't even know if you are operating in the market. I'll just keep going here. If the subsidiary is wholly owned, like 100% owned, not just like a 20 or 30% or 40% or whatever, or a 50%, where you have controlling interest. If it's wholly owned, it basically means you're doing business with yourself. You have someone managing that company, but ultimately it's a wholly owned subsidiary. You should disclose that stuff. And the reason for this is a failure to disclose it may materially mislead your investors. Like if part of your business seems like it's doing really well, but your subsidiary that you own can't produce products for you anymore, or it can't make it can't purchase the products that you're selling, and that accounts for 50% of your revenue. Like that's not up to another company to fail. That's up to like you to fail. And if you fail in one part, you're failing in both parts. So that disclosure is huge. And then this walks through just a very basic example. So for example, party A, which is an affiliate, we're going to say it's an affiliate, may be selling products or services, let's just say services, or products, to party B. So you have party A selling products to party B at a rate that differs significantly from the open market. So you and I would say, hey, you've got something that I want, and I'll pay you. This example would be the fair market would be $1,000. You and I can agree on that. But if you have an affiliate party A might sell, let's say this is a Treasury, they might sell that Treasury bond at a much lower price of $990 rather than being at the fair market of $1,000. And the reason for that is so that party B could then turn around and sell those securities at that market price and immediately profit $10 because their cost is lower. So party A then offsets the expense of $10. So now party A says, I sold that at a loss. I have a $10 loss, and I can just take that loss and shift it over to my parent company. And so it's off my books, and my partner, party B, now shows they made a big profit on the sale. I show a net balance. Like I don't show anything except some cash on my balance sheet. And then my parent company is showing and hiding the loss. And this is exactly what Enron did with SVEs or SPEs, which are special purpose entities. So Enron and Andy Fastow made, like, I think there was one called an entity called Jedi Knight or something, like, I mean, just these crazy names to come up with like at least dozens. I think it was a bunch of these companies that just existed on face value or on paper. And he would take the earnings or the losses and their liabilities from Enron and disperse those out to these SPEs. And that's the reason why this is so important, because you need to disclose the parties that you have an affiliate relationship with. So within that example, you can just use, if party A needs to move something from their balance sheet that's bad, like you have bad loans, they can use party B as a dumpster and then reverse the whole transaction back. And that's why hedge funds are so good at this, because they're dark zones. Like, you can't see the losses once they funnel back to the parent company, the parent hedge fund. So once it hits Citadel Advisors, you can't see that loss on the books. Citadel doesn't have to publish statements like a public company does. Only they're market makers, which is why we're dealing with like this much information trying to put together this big of a story. And that's Alexis's point. Right.
Right. Okay. So let me just make sure I understand, and just in case anyone else has a question about this. So essentially, if I was like, I'm Citadel, and I have another, smaller company called, Corey's Cash Cow, and so if I have a loss or something, and I don't want to report that loss, and I send it to Corey's Cash Cow, I look like I'm doing better because I don't have that loss on my books, right? It's like, it's in Corey's Cash Cow, they're not doing so well. And so, but I'm doing great. Is that kind of like the gist of it?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you make the web so complicated to follow with those entities by saying party A is an affiliate of party B and it's the only member of party B, and then party B is an affiliate of party C and it's the only member of party B or party C, and then you make that chain so complicated, and then ultimately it just wraps back around to the hedge fund. So the hedge fund owns all of them. They just make you going around in a circle so many times to try and figure out who really owes who what, which is also the danger of rehypothecation, because once you have assets that are pledged to multiple parties, it's like everybody in there is playing musical chairs and there's only one chair. So yeah, that's the gravity of this situation. So
let me ask you that, is that fraudulent for me to, like, basically what they're doing there? Like,
it's not. Because because the laws are designed, it should be.
Right.
Okay, it should be. In 2008, this would have already popped if the Federal Reserve wasn't pumping out so many reserve notes and buying back so many bonds, which is the whole danger of the everything short. The entire system is being propped up on checks being written from the Federal Reserve. So if they stopped doing that, there wouldn't be any good collateral to funnel or fund the overnight repos, which turns treasuries to cash. So if they stopped with all the treasuries, now they're left with this, like, oh my God, what are we going to liquidate? Well, nothing, because we're no different than we were in 2008. There's no good stuff to start converting.
Right. Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of just we're walking through it, man. We're building up to it. So, so with that being said, that's the reason for the significance with related party disclosures. This is the first violation on there, and this is getting into the actual detailed post. So I've highlighted this part right here. This talks about the timeliness of the reporting with the trace system, but this is the bread and butter of it right here. So on August 2nd, 2017 through December 8th, 2018, so just a little over a year, right? 15 months, September, October, December, 16 months. Citadel Securities reported 452,451 Treasury transactions to trace that it was not required to report. Okay, these reports constituted over 14% of the total Treasury reports made by the firm. The over-reporting occurred when the firm transferred Treasury securities within its internal accounts, not inside, because the firm unintentionally removed the logic to prevent these internal transfers from being automatically reported. Okay, so what the hell does that mean, right? So this is the way the trace system works. When you send a transaction into the trace system, they need to validate that. What they're trying to do is say, is this a legitimate transaction? And so they kind of ask you some stuff to prove that. They give you these boxes to check, if you will. So if they're legitimate and they occur with an affiliate, they want to know that, so that Enron does not happen all over again. So for the sake of argument, let's just ignore that part where it says they unintentionally remove the logic, because that's the checkmate to this entire thing. Is like the amount of times they've said that, it's got to be BS. I'm calling them out on BS. Like, you guys are doing this intentionally. So let's just ignore that for a second and walk through how this breaks down within their books. So Citadel reported over 452,000 securities transactions, and this is only 14% of total reported transactions to trace. This means that Citadel reported 3,231,792 Treasury transactions, and only 14% of those, which, yeah, 452,451. So 452,000 of those were in excess. Now, one transaction doesn't necessarily mean one bond or one Treasury security. Sorry. So there are more Treasury securities than just bonds, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a one-for-one exchange. So what you have is the potential for this to be thousands. If you have 10 bonds, this is what you and I were talking about on the phone the other day. If you have 10 bonds or 10 treasuries in one of these transactions, add a zero. So now it's 30 million. And then you have to multiply that by the dollar amount of those treasuries. So we're talking billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars flowing through the trace system. And this was just for 1 year for those 16 months.
Right.
So they were not required to report 14% of those because they should have flagged as internal transfers, not as treasury transactions. But again, they're saying the system wasn't there to prevent it from catching it. BS.
Right. Well, didn't they say they unintentionally turned it off or something? What was the verbiage? Unintentionally removed the logic.
And in
what?
Dude.
Like unintentionally remove the logic to prevent these. Just like, okay. Anyways, I don't have to. I don't really have to even say anything there because it's just so.
It's so blatant.
Yeah.
So now we're starting to uncover the different corners of the fraud triangle, right? So the pressure, incentive, and opportunity. Citadel was obviously compliant for 86% of these treasury reports. So why would they feel the need to unintentionally over-report 14%? Now, what that's saying is it's starting to look like it's kind of a pick and choose thing, right? Because they have these transactions that are occurring within the realm of compliance, but then 14%, man, that's material. That's huge. That's not just like, oh, we caught less than 1% of these slipping through. Like, no, it was done to make an impact. So at the first glance here, it's like, okay, we can kind of say, Citadel, why are you walking like a duck? Why are you walking like a duck?
And really quick, that 14%, even though it's 14%, based on the possible calculations, that could be how much again? Like, was it billions?
So just the 14% now, this is the total volume pumped through the Treasury Trace system, or excuse me, through Finra's Trace system. And the 452,000, if you say there are 10 bond or 10 treasuries in each transaction, put a zero on that. Now it's 4,500,000. And bonds are $1,000 par value. I don't know what the current bond price is, but I mean, say conservatively $800. Say each bond is $800. Now you're talking 400 or 4 million, 4.5 million times 800, 32. Was that three?
Add a few zeros.
300. Yeah, right. So 800, 2 zeros, 4.5 million times 800 would be 3,600 million. So that'd be billion. So 3,600,000 or 3,600,000,000.
Okay, right? So yeah. Either way, what I was trying to get at is even though it's quote unquote only 14%, that could potentially be billions.
Yeah, dude, and that's conservatively speaking. Like this was just something that we unintentionally did something and we accidentally made $3.6 billion. Right.
And so this is why it's so important that people understand. Like, sure, they're like, I don't know. It's clear that they're willing to eat these funds, and I think it's and what I mean by funds is the any kind of penalty that they might incur, the fines. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to know that because we're not talking a couple $100 here and there. It's big money.
This is huge. This is big money. This is like my whole point on this coming around the time that they were implementing the tapering program is like, okay, if they were getting away with the 3.6 million or even more, you can argue that they were doing it more before they knew that they were going to start being slapped down with this. And then they kind of, along with the tapering program, they probably tapered back a little bit. This could have been a much more pervasive issue. And so, yeah, it definitely presents like the opportunity with this system being the way that it is, the opportunity is there for them to do it because they're doing it. The motivation is there for them because they're making buku bucks on it, and the incentive and the pressure could be there because if this system were to crack down on them doing this entirely, they're going to eat at least a $3.6 billion loss. Right. So the opportunity and the incentive and the motivation, it's just like, okay, dude, the fraud triangle is starting to jive a little bit here. And so then this is how did Finra actually find out these were internal transfers, right? Because up to this point, it's like, okay, you guys, how were you able to look? Now they can actually look in their books, right? Finra can say we're subpoenaing, or I don't know if the correct term is subpoena, but we're requesting this information from you. If you don't submit it, we're going to give you an even bigger fine. So just show us your books. Yeah. And it's pretty much the same way that I did. Is looking for clues. You're just looking for little breadcrumbs. And so this is Citadel Securities related party disclosures from 2020, which is the same as in 2019. The reason why I say 2019 is because this violation period ended in October 2019. So this would have had to have been like the state of their balance sheet at 2019 would have had to have explained this. Like you can't look at 2020 because it might be different than when this fine was going on in 2019. So I double checked that and it is the same. So this is that party A, party B, party C thing that I was telling you about here. So this is from Citadel Securities related party disclosures. It's the first note in their financial statements. It's like right off the bat. So Citadel Securities, the company, blah, 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 member of the U.S. of the SEC, as well as the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, or FINRA, CSHC US LLC, otherwise in another acronym, CSHC is an affiliate and the sole member of the company. Okay, so CSHC is the only member of Citadel Securities. That's all you need to know.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little confusing because it's weird, but
it is, that's dude. It's gonna get weird. It's gonna get weird. Okay. So that's what I was telling you. So it's like, okay, CSHC. So this is like the Jedi Knight thing I was telling you about. So FASTA would create these different entities and give them weird names and give them weird relationships, and then say, oh yeah, they're all connected, and this is how they're connected, but. This is kind of similar to that. Like, okay, it's not Citadel Securities. They could just as easily put the actual word here, but that would be blatantly obvious that it's like, okay, that sounds like the same company. And this gives it a little bit of a veil, right?
Okay.
So CSHC, who are you really? So ladies and gentlemen, presenting Citadel Securities Institutional LLC. It's the same damn company, dude. Citadel Securities Institutional LLC. Think it's a different company? Or think it's the same company? Nope. Citadel Securities. So this is who we've been looking at. Citadel Securities LLC. Okay. And then these are the financial statements published for Citadel Securities Institutional LLC.
Okay. So in my example, my Corey's cash cow that's Citadel Securities, the top one, the Citadel Securities Institutional. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. So yeah. Like,
so basically, they okay, so break it down.
I'm gonna break it down. I'm gonna break it down for you. So Citadel, the hedge fund up here, Citadel Advisors, is this dark zone. Okay. It's the parent company. We can't see anything in there. We can see some of their like asset allocations and stuff, but as far as like their short positions and their actual daily transactions and balance sheets and all this good stuff that would give us indicators of what the company is doing is dark. So all we can see is Citadel Securities LLC. Or all we can see is just the name of the company, basically, so the parent. And then underneath the parent, they say, I'm going to create a special purpose entity called Citadel Securities. I want you to be my market maker. So like the DTC, where they make sure that, you know, the stock is there, the cash is there, and then they swap the transaction out. Citadel Securities does the market transaction stuff. And then I'm going to create another entity. And I'm going to call it Citadel Securities Institutional. And it looks like the institutional guy is the person that takes, so the parent affiliate company up here sends the stocks or the treasuries down to the market maker, Citadel Securities. Citadel Securities kind of kicks them over to Securities Institutional, and then Institutional sends them out into the market to be sold to a third party vendor.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so you with me so far?
Yes.
And what I just read off about them being the only member of the company is that it's like, okay, the opening disclosure is saying, this isn't saying that they don't do transactions with other people. This is just saying that the organization is made in a way that Citadel Securities and Citadel Securities Institutional are the only members of themselves. Like they, if does that make sense?
Yeah, I see. I see what you're saying.
Okay.
It's just so crazy how, like, first of all, the lack of originality with the name. But
yeah. It's gonna be that way, man. So it's a completely different company on the books. These guys are affiliated to one another, but they exist separately as special purpose entities, and that's what I was just explaining, SPEs. So let's walk through this again, because you got to keep digesting this in order to follow it.
Right.
So Citadel Securities lists CSHC US LLC CSHC. it's stupid laughable as an affiliate, page 2, and is the sole member of the company, and this was the disclosure right there. Okay, so what I just walked you through. Now the institutional side, Citadel Securities Institutional, lists CSHC US LLC, otherwise known as CSUH. So the only difference is they took these two letters and changed them from HC to UH. So now we have party 3. Citadel Securities Institutional LLC, same disclosure, same spot. CSHC US LLC. I had to look at this 3 times before I even caught that this part was different.
Oh yeah.
I thought they were both the same. I thought they were both the same right here.
Right.
So what this is saying is, at one point there was a company or a hedge fund or something that merged, and this is the way to refer to each individual part within that merger. Altogether, it's CSHC US LLC. CSHC US LLC, and they refer to each part as an individual entity right here. So this is where it starts to clarify that. So CSUH, who the hell is this? I had to pull out a dig all the way back to 2016 to find this, and this is that same organization breakdown there. Are we able to see that on your screen here?
Yes. Okay,
so I'm gonna read it. So Citadel Security Institutional LLC. Okay, so the party 2. At the time of funding, it's this line right here. At the time of funding, CLP Holdings 3, it's like a nursery rhyme, CLP Holdings 3 LLC, otherwise known as CLP3, was the sole member of the company. On January 1st, 2016, CLP3 merged with and into CSHC US LLC CSUH, or an affiliate of the company. So it's just a way of saying, well, I'll just go down to the next one. So who is this now? Because now we have a third party member in here that has merged, and it sounds like there's some more fishy stuff, but it could still be external. And if they're still external, then that says, okay, you have 2 entities that are controlled by an external agency. This becomes a lot less suspicious, right? Wrong. Citadel Securities is a wholly owned subsidiary of CLP. This was from 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. So I found this in 2015's financial statement. So the year before. Citadel Securities, a wholly owned subsidiary of CLP Holdings 3 LLC. So remember back to that related party disclosures thing we're talking about. This isn't an affiliated party here at all. Like affiliate in the very least sense, but this is a wholly owned subsidiary that is not reporting. This is a wholly owned subsidiary that is reporting revenues. It's a wholly owned subsidiary.
Okay, really quick. So break down wholly owned subsidiary. Like wholly owned by Citadel or wholly owned by like
yes.
Okay.
So that is right here. Citadel Securities is a wholly owned, 100% owned by CLP Holdings 3, a limited liability company, and CLP Holdings merged into this CSUH like 15 days after this.
Okay.
So they are organized under the laws of the state of Delaware, and in parentheses, what this means is this CLP Holdings 3, Citadel parent and collectively with Citadel Securities and CSPI, which is another part of this, is referred to as Citadel. So Citadel, the parent company, CSPI, like Citadel Securities, is also a wholly owned subsidiary of Citadel Parent. So what this is saying is this breakdown right here. Are you able to see this?
Yes.
The Citadel parent company owns 100% of CLP Holdings 3, which became CSUH in 2016. CSUH is the only member of CSHC, which was Citadel Securities Institutional. Okay. Excuse me. This CSU, just the second part. So CSUH is the only member of CSHC, and CSHC is also managed by Citadel Parent. So that's where you get back up like the full circle. So CSUH right here, the third party, is the sole member of Citadel Securities Institutional. Citadel Securities Institutional is the only entity or the only member of Citadel Securities. Citadel Securities is owned by Citadel Parent. So it's a circle. They're all owned by Citadel Advisors, the parent company.
Holy smokes.
So it's all internal transfers to each other.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
And is Citadel Securities, is that Citadel Parent in that little...
Citadel Securities is Citadel, the market maker. So you have Citadel Parent up here.
Okay.
And then you have Citadel Securities Institutional, Citadel Securities CSUH, which was the merger of CLP Holdings. And then you have so many different parts of Citadel that's like you have Citadel Securities LLC, you have Citadel Securities LP, which is like a limited partnership, and all of these people do different things, but they're all related. They're all and now accounting lets you do this because there is treatment for all of those entities as individual practices or individual companies.
Okay, so
the problem is you just have to disclose these things with one another.
And
you have,
are they disclosing those?
That's what this violation is for up here.
That
where
they're not disclosing it. Okay, it's a tangled web, and I'm just trying to make sure I break it down as well as I can. My brain is extra smooth tonight, so
is mine, man. This is just smokes. It's okay. So basically, Citadel is Citadel. No wonder why Finra was ticked, right? It looks like Citadel took treasuries from Citadel Securities and transferred them to Citadel Securities Institutional, but reported them as sales to the trace system. So where does that leave us with this? Citadel, this is the second violation. This is how we start to say, okay, one thing, let's give it to you. Let's say you did unintentionally remove the logic from your system. Let's say you did. Step 2. FINRA provides that when a trade report does not reflect either a commission, a markup, or a markdown, which if you'll go back to that example I was explaining about related parties with the, like you and I can sell it to each other for 1,000, but say you're really tight with, a sibling or something, and you say, all right, I'll give you 10% off. That's a markdown.
Gotcha.
So if that markdown exists, you have to note that as well. And if it doesn't exist, you need to mark it on the transaction and say that there is a remuneration involved. It sounds like it should be better remuneration, but no remuneration involved with this transaction. So that's what this is saying here, that when a trade port does not reflect either a commission, markup, or markdown, the member should include the no remuneration indicator. But between July 10th, 2017 and October 2019, so we're talking 2 years here. This is the entirety of the fine. 45,638 instances, Citadel Securities failed to append the no remuneration indicator to trace reports for Treasury transactions with an affiliate that were at cost. So what this is saying is, let's you also get the little right here, and firm did not include the no remuneration indicator because it did not have the necessary logic to automatically code these. It's like, okay, so let's ignore that again,
Yeah.
right? Again, let's ignore that. And they do this in almost every effing violation. We've already covered that. Now, what is remuneration? Which I've already explained. Basically, it's a type of compensation. In the case of Citadel Securities, it's a price adjustment that is passed to Citadel Securities Institutional when a treasury is sold or lent out. A normal market transaction might sell a security for $1,000. In this case, the $1,000 is entirely represented by the bond's value. So you sell a transaction or you sell a security, it's $1,000. You say there's no remuneration on it. You send it to the trace system. The trace system checks it, $1,000. It knows that that $1,000 is entirely reflective of the treasury itself, and that the treasury isn't being priced at like 900, and you're given $100 kickback to the person that you bought it from. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So an affiliated market transaction might sell the treasury security for $990 with a $10 remuneration for a total of $1,000. So the total transaction comes through at $1,000, but if you don't indicate that there's a remuneration, or you don't say that there was no remuneration, then Finra's system is going to think, okay, the entire $1,000 was just reported for the value of the bond or value of the treasury, and it doesn't know that for 46,000 instances you've actually been giving yourself a payment. It thinks that you've just been sending $1,000 transaction time and time again.
I see. Okay.
Okay. So now when you stack those two together, because Finra asks for companies to disclose this because it can be heavily abused, obviously, it is. This is not what happened to Citadel Securities, though. There were 46,000 instances between those 2 years where Citadel Securities did not indicate this. So if you fail to indicate this, and you're also forcefully pushing more of your internal transfers as normal transactions, it really starts to look like you're covering your tracks. So one system goes down and says, okay, the system that should prevent these internal transfers from going to trace, that's down. And now the system that is going to stamp all of these transactions to say that there's a kickback going on here because we're doing this as you know, with ourselves and not with external parties. Now that system goes down. You're really making this look like it's supposed to be a regular external transaction with like a customer that's buying these from you. Are you with me?
Yes.
So with that, the second part's like, so Citadel, Walkin, now you're talking like a duck. So why are you talking like a duck? Violation 3. This is the smoking gun, right?
Really quick, before we get to violation 3, violation 2. So it just hit me that for 2 years or whatever, or a year and a half, whatever it was, right there, July 2017 through like, or no, maybe that's not
it's over 2 years,
right?
Over that July
2017. How did they just? And I don't know if you have the answer to this, but it's like how did this happen for so long, and whether it went under the radar or they just caught it? How do they? You figured that they would do like reviews or audits every so often. Do they do an audit every 2 years? Maybe that's how they found it.
We're gonna get down to the companies.
Okay.
We're gonna get down to the companies audit, and then we're also gonna talk about Finra, because Finra. Another weird thing with all these Finra violations is that it'll say like Citadel became aware of this issue roughly 2 or 3 months before we actually approached them about it. We being Finra. And so it seems like when you approach them, they're like, yeah, we knew about this issue. It's been going on. We're working to fix it. And we know it's been going on. Sorry, here's a check. Won't happen again. We'll take care of it. And then Finra comes back like a couple years later, especially with the short problems that they're having. And they'll say, man, you're still not including these indicators. And they'll slap them with another fine. So Finra is processing this data. And I don't know if they're just doing the auditing software now that you have to process mass accounting transactions, especially live accounting transactions, to say like if there's any deviation from what's normal behavior, they'll kind of flag it. So this could be that they noticed there was this uptick in bond transactions, and if they see enough of this going on with different companies, they'll start to say, okay, we know X number of bonds are going in or treasuries are going into the market, but all of these market makers are supposed to be selling more bonds than exist. Like something's got to go on to be going on here, and they'll say, okay, you're obviously doing so. There's a whole bunch of ways where they can kind of catch on to what's going on. But
Okay. Jeez.
yeah, it's a nightmare. Violation 3. Okay.
Okay.
For that 1 year period, a little over a year, there were 11,000, call it 12,000 instances where Citadel Securities reported that the contraparty in a transaction was a customer when the transaction was with an affiliate. So what is a contraparty? A contraparty is the other side of the broker trade. So you've always got the bid and the ask price, right? The contraparty is the affiliate saying, I've got this security, I want to sell it to you for this. And then the contraparty says, I'll buy it for this. So when they make a sale, what they're saying here is the person that they were selling it to in that bid ask exchange was actually a customer, when in reality it was another affiliate. So they were selling transactions to themselves, but they were saying that we were selling them to customers.
Oh my gosh.
You cannot put all three of those together and say that it's accidental.
Right.
You can't. You cannot put all three of those together. Now, so first is, let's see if this has it. Yeah, here you go. So the firm discovered this issue in August 2018. Conveniently 3 months, September, October, November. 3 months prior to being contacted by Finra, and fixed the issue on November 15th, 2018. You know what fixed means? Is they rolled their system back. They rolled their system back, and they just said, or they went in and they flipped a switch in the system, in the software, to start correcting this, and then immediately, walked them through like, okay, the problem's fixed. They probably gave them a demo of it. Finra left, and then they went right back to doing it.
Holy smoke. So speculatively, you could say that they intentionally just like leave it off. They get caught or whatever. Then they say, okay, well, we'll turn it on. They show them it works, and then they turn it off again. Because they'd rather
seems like that's
right, because they'd rather eat the cost. Because people have to keep in mind, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of us are probably pretty business oriented, but and this is why it's so important to keep in mind that these guys are not afraid to eat the cost. Like these guys, if it's, you have to take that into consideration. If it's cheaper for me to do this, if it's gonna, it's literally like cost analysis. If I were to have a product and I'm going to sell it for this amount, if I'm going to have employees in this and that, I need to make sure that my product is going to be worth it. I need to make a profit on it. And so as long as I'm making a profit, then that's cool. And the problem, it seems like, is there's not like, okay, first fine is this amount, second fine is this amount, third fine, you can't trade, or you can't do something for X amount of time. It's not,
that's
not
supposed
harsh enough.
to be that's really supposed to be the SEC getting involved. So the Finra just, getting ahead of myself in the post again, but yeah, that's Finra is the one that's saying, you guys have all this sketchy stuff going on. We've been slapping these fines on you. We're obviously exposing you for doing the stuff that you're doing. Finra is like mom going and talking to dad, the SEC, and saying Johnny is misbehaving again. But instead, because Finra is controlled by the SEC, ultimately, I can't imagine how this wouldn't work, but ultimately Finra issues these fines out to these companies, and then the fines go back to the SEC as revenues for fines and violations from all the other companies. But if Finra doesn't tell SEC, or if SEC doesn't go to Finra and say, how can we fix this problem? They don't want to fix the problem, because if they fix the problem, now the SEC is losing millions. I think 2020 or 2019, Finra totaled like $61 million.
So
just in these sort of violations.
Wait, so what's the SEC's incentive to stop
this? The SEC, dude, if you listen to the last committee hearing, it made me want to puke, because the committee meeting was talking about, there was this guy in there saying, somebody asked the question, what are you going to do? What are you doing about, I wish I knew his name. Said, what are you doing about all these things? Like, there are all these fraudulent activities going on. And his response was to try and say, in these events, we try to look to the regulators of the field, like being the people producing guidance, like the public. Like we look to the public accounting, the PCAOB, which is the accounting board for all these, and then you have the FASB who's pushing out accounting standards. And they'll say, yeah, we'll look to these people to kind of guide us on how we should proceed. No, you don't. You're all you're doing is finger pointing.
Yes,
That's all
everybody's
you're
finger
doing.
pointing at each other. Everyone's
Yeah.
waiting for someone else to react. And the SEC really doesn't have an incentive, because if they shut it down, they're getting paid. Everybody's winning, except for, it seems like, the retail investor in these kinds of situations. Like
The 99%, man. Everybody's winning but the bottom. And that's why this is so huge, because this is blatant. That's all this is. So
okay, yeah, let's
did
continue.
that kind of clear it up to go? Okay, so
I'm upset. I'm not happy about it, but yes,
I know.
it cleared it up.
I know, that's why these things are so huge. So so really, it doesn't get more obvious than this. Citadel Securities gets busted pushing transactions into Trace when they're really just internal transfers between SPEs. They're then cited for failing to indicate a no remuneration transaction with affiliated parties. Finally, they misclassified the nature of the contraparty in almost 12,000 transactions, saying they were customers instead of their own, you guessed it, SPEs. And so, want to know more? Or do you want even more than that? Check out this disclosure from Citadel Securities. So this is like the way that they're baking this into the financial statements to tell you that it's happening. Okay. So this expenses section up here at the top, you remember how I was saying they take the expenses. So party A sells a discounted bond or discounted treasury. I gotta stop saying that. Discounted treasury for $9.90 to its affiliate party. The affiliate party makes a good revenue on it because they're making like a $10 revenue for every transaction or every treasury. But party A is left with $10 in the hole. So they'll take that expense or that loss and then pump it back over to the hedge fund. With Enron, it was the opposite way. Enron actually had to report their financial statements, so they would take it and push it out to these SPEs. Well, now it's the other way because the hedge fund has total cover. You can't get in and see what kind of operating loss is going on with the hedge fund. So these public reporting companies like Citadel Securities and Citadel Securities Institutional will reverse the flow, and then they'll pump it back into the hedge fund. And all the hedge fund has to do is report like a 13F and just give updates on when it acquires more shares or more ownership in different companies. But they don't have to tell you like the inner workings of their incomes and their expenses and stuff like that, which is just like so anyway, this is just saying, so the transaction with related parties. So pursuant to the administrative services agreement, the company, and this is Citadel Securities, the company reimburses CMER and SMER, which is Citadel Security or Citadel of America and Citadel Enterprises of America, and their affiliates, just more Citadel stuff, for direct and allocable administrative, general, and operating expenses, including their employees' expenses like their contribution or compensation and benefits on behalf of the company. So this is also another way of saying like what they're telling you is, hey, the flow of funds also goes back to our hedge fund. We are also in agreement to, or we're also responsible for reporting expenses back to, and you can hide those easily in administrative expenses or general expenses. You know how vague the term general expense is, or operating expense. If Citadel Securities does this transaction with Finra, where they're pushing these through, and those are the normal operations of business, then that loss that they're taking, that $10 loss, is considered an operating expense. They'll take that expense, throw it back to the hedge fund, and remove it from their expense payable from their balance sheet, and they don't have to report it.
What?
I mean, on top of that, look at this. This is within, again, the related parties. Executing and settlement activities. During 2020, CSIN, which is Citadel Securities Institutions, provided executive or execution services to the company under a cost-plus agreement. Okay, so what this is saying is Citadel Securities Institutions. Remember how I was talking to you about like how Finra got onto them for saying you guys aren't posting a no remuneration flag. You're just saying that you're sending it out as the cost. Well, a remuneration is a a little profit that you would tack onto that transaction. Citadel Securities Institutional provided execution services to Citadel Securities under a cost plus agreement. Cost plus sounds a lot like a remuneration agreement, and that's because it is. So here's what Citadel Securities is doing to get through Finra's system. Okay. So bringing this all together, number one, Citadel Securities sells treasuries to affiliate parties such as CSIN, which is institutional. 2, Citadel Securities marks most of those transactions with a no remuneration indicator after selling the security to that affiliate party, which is Citadel Securities institutional. So in this scenario, they're saying, I'm going to sell you that $1,000 treasury. I'm not going to say that I'm making any money on it. Finra can't touch me. I'm fine. And I'm going to market most of them with no remuneration so that Finra knows not only is this a regular ordinary transaction, I'm not making any money on it. It's not with an affiliate party. Okay. 3, to Finra, this complies with Trace because it looks like a typical transaction without a markup or markdown on the price of the treasury. 4, at the end of the month, Citadel Securities reimburses, which is what this is. They reimburse Citadel Securities institutions under a cost plus agreement. As a result of this, the company incurred service fee expenses, which is like saying, because Citadel Securities Institution then takes that transaction, it makes it through Finra. Now Citadel Securities Institutional has it, and they can sell it out into the open market. Then they just go back to Citadel Securities and say, hey, we're going to charge you a fee, a service fee for selling that. Well, what does that sound like? That sounds like you just selling the security directly for a markup.
Right.
It's the same scenario. You're taking, if you sell a security at $1,000 and you mark it up $10, your total transaction is $1,010.
Right.
You would have to mark that by saying this is an agreement that contains remuneration, and Finra would flag it. Finra would say, okay, why are you getting a kickback from somebody that you're saying is not an affiliated party? Instead, they send it through for $1,000. They mark it with a no remuneration, and then at the end of the month, Citadel Securities Institutional then gives them a service fee expense. They send them a bill and say, hey, for that $1,000 transaction, we're going to charge you $10.
Jeez,
you get it?
Yes, they're just, and so that's so it doesn't get flagged. It looks legit, and then they're getting oh my gosh, this is like, it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Would a good example of this be, you're paying someone for their time instead of paying for the service, you're paying for their time, and then, well, maybe that's not the best example.
Going with what you're saying here. It's like pretend you have someone that comes over and they're supposed to be volunteering. They're supposed to be doing like community service. Okay. And you've got someone, every time somebody goes out to do community service and you say, okay, you worked 8 hours today. All right, I'm going to mark you down for 8 hours. And then at the end of the month, that person that was volunteering goes back to the person they were volunteering for when the guy that's there to mark down the time isn't there. And they say, okay, here's your check.
It's just so crazy how that just happens. Like, okay. Well,
on top of that, so here's where Citadel Securities. So Citadel Securities pays them, they reimburse them for that transaction, plus they give them a little bit of a tip, right? A little profit to compensate. And then Citadel Securities records the commission sales from Citadel Securities Institutional for selling the security. So it's like this entire thing should be able to operate without Citadel Securities Institutional.
Right.
Like Citadel Securities should be able to just go out into the market, which they do. They work with third-party people all the time. So why are you putting this unnecessary second step there unless it's for something to squeak through compliance?
Right. Which is what it seems like.
And they're making money. And they're making money doing it.
Making a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
To the point where it's worth going through the extra hassle and extra everything.
To where it's worth having another company that you have to pay for.
Right.
So all of that to then say, that's the loophole. right? They're able to remain compliant with Finra because they pay for the services, which is the markup and markdown provided by Citadel Securities Institutional after the transactions are cleared through the system. They just disguise them as service fees. So instead of paying during the transaction by remuneration, they simply leave it off the books and hide it on their financial statements. So if you're wondering where the SEC is in all this, this is where you and I were just getting to. The SEC and Finra are both regulatory agencies for financial institutions. So if you look at any sort of fund, hedge fund, if you look at their Form ADV, if you look at their all of their statements where they're trying to basically, any statement that they have, they're going to tell you up at the top, we're registered and compliant with the SEC and with Finra. Like they have to. So I'm now 100% convinced. There's no doubt in my mind that the SEC has given the responsibility of investigating fraud to Finra, while the SEC works on creating legislation to stop these acts. But it seems like the SEC is in this continuous, like perpetual, we're going to continue to point the finger to figure out who should give us the best advice.
Right.
While we rake in fees from all of these hedge funds.
My speculation would be they don't care, because why would they care? It's almost like saying no one's getting hurt. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's not hurting anybody.
Exactly, man. That's exactly what's going on.
Holy
That's exactly
smokes.
Right. So, however, it appears that the SEC and Finra are working as totally separate agencies, while the SEC is supposed to be overseeing Finra. I'm convinced the money flows directly to the SEC from Finra fines, and the SEC is at risk of losing that revenue if they actually start cracking down on these people. And now I'm presenting a genuine case here. Like this, you should be able to take this to somebody in Congress and say, you and I just walked through it in an hour. You know, you should be able to take this to somebody and say, what's up? And they should not be able to talk their way out of this.
Right. I mean, it's.
So here's the auditor in that. So here's the auditor, right? If you're wondering where their auditor is, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is, I thought I actually had one pulled up, but if you're wondering where the auditor is in all this, PricewaterhouseCoopers is the auditor of Citadel. Their job as an auditor is just to verify the statements as being fairly presented. Like they don't have to verify anything else.
Right.
They just have to tell you
how it happened.
They don't have to tell you any of that. They just have to tell you the numbers that they're putting on their statements are fairly presented. Like you might have a little bit of wiggle room, but the numbers that you say should be here are here. And the reason why is because all audit firms are now in the business of consulting, like Arthur Andersen did with Enron. When Arthur Andersen got popped, or Enron got popped, Arthur Andersen got popped because they were all consulting them and saying, hey, we'll sign off on the financial statements if you pay us a whole bunch of money in consulting fees. And then we'll just sign off on them knowing that, you know, they're not credible, that they're really, they should really be getting a qualified opinion instead of an unqualified, which means unqualified is like a good opinion. Okay. So they're all sitting in this room and discussing the best way to present this without looking like a giant fraud. And you want to see how bad this situation has become. This is like the cherry on top. This is like these actions right here by Citadel are just one speck, right? So this is from a Form 10K that I found while I was actually talking with Alexis. From Citadel's recent 13GA filings, this is from, I'll have to put this, I think it's Mudrick Capital. So see there, it's a good thing I did go through this and review it. So this is Mudrick Capital's Acquisition Corporation. If you're wondering where the auditor, blah, 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 you may want to see how bad the situation has become, check out this 10K. It's on page 4 from Citadel's one of their recent filings on 2/16/2021, which, by the way, there are a whole bunch. Looks like I don't have it pulled up, but there are a whole bunch of filings that hit on 2/16, and it's just like they're way more than normal. So they're shifting some really big money around. But keep in mind, this is an acquisition company that specializes in purchasing companies that are headed for bankruptcy. So they're a capital acquisition company. When companies aren't doing well and they've got a lot of assets on hand that could still be valuable, the value of the company drops because their outlook isn't good. So companies like this, like Mudrick Capital, Mudrick Capital will come in, or they'll establish funds specifically for buying up undervalued companies and then turning around and selling and liquidating them and making millions of dollars just in destroying companies. So they specialize in finding the companies that aren't doing well, and so their financial disclosures are all about like negative outlooks going forward. Like they're trying to find the industries that aren't doing well. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this as much as I can.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, this is just a section from their outlook part of their financial statement. According to the S&P, which is Standard & Poor's, it's like the bond rating agency, Standard & Poor's, they publish, credit outlooks and stuff like that. Their leveraged loan, S&P's leveraged loan weakest link count, which reflects companies with a B- or lower credit rating and negative outlook, has more than doubled since 2019, rising from 145 companies, or 11% of the S&P's coverage universe, which is Standard & Poor's, to 329 companies as of June 2020. So this is like right through, the not global financial crisis, but all the COVID stuff, right? U.S. default rates have risen sharply this year and are projected to continue to rise over the next 12 months. According to the S&P, the trailing 12-month default rate has doubled since the beginning of the year to 3.9% and is projected to reach over 10% within the next 12 months. You know what 10% default's going to do? Like this, and again, I mean, this may be a little more negative because it was through COVID, but defaults have ranged across a large number of companies, a large number of industries, including business services, consumer, and industrial, according to S&P. Now, this is the meat. The U.S. leveraged loan market, like the margin loan, you're buying on credit. The leveraged loan market is approximately 1.2 trillion, which is approximately double the size of the market during the 2008-2009 credit cycle. This means that the similar default rates in today's market would imply a significantly larger volume of restructured liabilities. Collateralized loan obligations, the CLOs, all those bad loans that were grouped into, all those bad mortgage bonds that were grouped into, it was a CLO, it's a collateralized loan obligation. Hasn't gone away. In fact, it represents a much larger ownership of today's leveraged loan market compared to the leveraged loan market in 2008-2009. There has been almost 2.5 times the CLO issuance from 2013 to 2019 of 743 billion compared to 2001-2007 of 302 billion. The increased CLO market of the leveraged loan market may lead to a larger number of post-restructured companies with equity ownership being held by CLOs, which could lead to attractive investment opportunities. So what they're saying is the number of companies that are holding all of these and that are being valued off of these, when that valuation starts to decrease, it looks like it's a good opportunity to get in there and just buy them.
Okay. So can you break down this section just like in a
yeah what I'm saying here is
further, like I understand the words, but I don't know if I understand it.
Yeah. So the default rate is what is concerning for a lot of these people that are paying back their liabilities. Right. So these are defaults from businesses that are just like, modestly sized companies that have maybe a couple hundred employees that are enough to make a big loan. The rate between them and all the way up to, let's see, the trailing 12-month default rate has doubled.
I see. So I'm sorry, really quick.
It's larger industries. Yeah, go ahead.
I see. Sorry. Yeah. So this is basically how many people are going to default on their loans. Essentially, they're not going to be able to
loans,
pay back,
yes.
like anything that they would have to pay back.
Or all of the commercial mortgage-backed securities, like the one thing that a lot of people aren't talking about. So you have the mortgage-backed security. You also have the commercial mortgage-backed security, which is like all those empty buildings that were in New York for however long that nobody was paying or nobody was going to.
Right.
Somebody was still having to pay for those.
Right.
Monthly. So you have all of those that are like companies that were in New York that were going out of business. Were having to pay the rent And so that would factor in here. Like eventually somebody would say, we're not in business anymore. We just default on our loan. So you default on that loan, you default on your credit loans, you default on your, which is where all of this liquidity just had to come from somewhere.
Right.
And they kind of used COVID as this guise to, if COVID wouldn't have existed, this would have had to happen anyway. Regardless, it would have, the whole system was just grinding to this halt. As evidenced by the build up to 2019 when the repo rates and everything started to go all wonky. So some big stuff was going on here that was requiring a huge overhaul of the system. And now that the leveraged loan market, what that means is that there are what was it, approximately double the size of the market due in 2008, 2009. These are people that are buying on credit. It's literally saying like the amount of people that are utilizing their credit has doubled since 2008, and the bad debt that's grouped into these different assets like CLOs represents 2.5 times the amount of bad debts that were, or just CLO exposure in general, that were here during the 2008 financial crisis. So what this is saying is the outlook is not good for a lot of people, and we are waiting on standby to go in and sweep all of those up. And this was, I don't know if this was as of the end of June 2020 or as the end of December 20, or maybe just S&P's standard or update hasn't been posted, so they just used the most recent update. But which would have been like June. So it's probably a bi-quarterly or semi-annually. But yeah, this is so that's what that means. Like the amount of all the junk that caused this thing in 2008 has gone through the roof. And it's because of stuff like this, these phony, wonky accounting things that allow for this stuff to happen. Man, it's
okay. Oh jeez.
So you start thinking like when you talk about somebody shorting Treasury bonds to oblivion, that doesn't seem like such a big thing now to comprehend. Like, especially after going through something like this, it's like, yeah, I can totally see it, because the better way to make money on a Treasury security was to start shorting it. you know, it's becoming too hard to make money doing the right thing. So if we just let it fail, we'll short it.
Right.
So.
Oh gosh. Okay. Oh
yeah, man. That's pretty much it. And then the very end of it is this is so much more than speculation. Citadel's a duck. Like, I'm not even calling out the walk and talk and stuff anymore. This is Citadel's a duck.
They are a freaking duck. Okay, let's go to the very, very top really quick. If you don't mind. Boy, oh boy, we went through a whole lot.
Yeah, dude, it's a mind F.
So, specifically, which part is the securities fraud?
The securities fraud is what they got busted for from Finra. Finra busted them for securities fraud, and the only reason why it wasn't listed as fraud is because Citadel, and I know other people that do this as well, but Citadel, all they have to do is say, oh yeah, we had that here, and then we accidentally took it out.
Okay, so
we accidentally removed it. And the amount of stuff that's piling up against them to say, you guys are accidentally doing things that benefit you a whole lot.
Oh yes, consistently
it's
consistently
doing it.
It's like it's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so they haven't officially been marked with fraud, but based on what they're doing, we could probably
I'm calling
confidently
them
out. Right. I could probably pretty confidently say as well, like, guys, like, they know what they're doing. It's very, very clear. It's very, very clear, but they don't freaking care. They don't. So what do we take from this? Like, what is? I mean, what do we do? Do we submit this to the SEC? What? I don't even know.
Yeah, the faith and the confidence that I have in the SEC to do the right thing with this is like zero.
Right. So
because they know it. Okay, even if there are a bunch of people in the SEC that think that, the justification is there, or the argument can be made that this is worth checking into, which I'm just a guy on a remote desktop that can look into this and come to this conclusion, and there are people light years beyond me that know more directly about
Right.
this, and it's hard to come to a different conclusion. So
Right.
so I think even the people that are at the SEC that can piece together bits and pieces of this, they don't have a really good shot at getting it up high enough to the person that can actually do something about it.
Right.
So,
and the people who have the skills and the tools and everything to do something about this,
yeah,
aren't.
Yeah, and or I mean, what we can do is get this in the hands of the people that you need to have someone in a House committee meeting that is not going to back down. You need to have someone in there like that's confident, like as confident as I am, to get in there and say, if every time they try to detour, or every time they try to turn around and point a finger at somebody and say, well, we look to this person for that. It's like, no, stop doing that. Stop saying that, because this is your game. This is your realm, and this is happening. You either acknowledge that or you don't. Based on something like this, it's either happening or it's not. And I'm not saying it. Finra's saying it. I'm just piecing together how it works for them.
Right.
So if that doesn't warrant an investigation into this, an independent private investigation into this, I don't know what does. And that's what it has to do. Is this has to be pushed out in front of a committee where someone can talk to someone from the SEC and not let them just cover by saying it's not their job.
Right. Unacceptable. So basically it seems like we need to make some noise, let some people know what is going on, call these guys out, basically expose it, bring it into the light and have people see what is happening, and not to let it happen anymore. Like, I feel like while I'm not particularly excited about the way the whole congressional hearings are going, I feel like it is a step in the right direction. Making some noise, letting people see. We just need the right person who will be a hero for us, and you just really stand up and give us a voice, and give us this just give us a chance or something. It's just
give us the hope again that somebody is going to be able to best represent our interests, and not some puppet that you don't know anything about. Right. Because there's people, if you're money motivated, then you have a point where you're going to sell out. But if you're done with the injustice of this, and that's what my job here with this was. I feel like my job was to put together something to where it is too hard for you to say that you're not guilty about this based on what we're reading. Yeah. And it's a case where, like, a team, I feel like this is what a lawyer would need to put together is a walkthrough, and you'd work with legal and accounting to make sure that it ties out. Right. And so naturally I'm going to throw this out there, and there are going to be people that say it's totally possible that this is done in a different way, and we need to really analyze that. But that's the beauty of what you and I are doing here. Yeah. Is getting this out to where I can throw this together in a few days and then throw it out in front of hundreds of thousands of people that are going to be able to dissect it. And I can already tell that we have incentives that I've been invited to and brought into a bunch of different side meetings with lawyers and accountants to start building these cases and building these out to where there are people that are ready to just jump in and are remaining anonymous for the sake of protecting their firms, but are ready to start contributing to this. And so we just have to keep furthering that initiative, man. Right. That's all that has to happen.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's I think you're 100% right. I think I guess we'll kind of wrap up there. I think we need that noise. We need people to know what is going on. We need a little bit of unrest. Need to shake some things up and just spread the word. Let people know what is going on. And I think that's so important. All right.
And ultimately, really quick, this boils down to the day-to-day, everything that everybody's doing with the market that they're watching so diligently. It's people that are trying to make these analytical insights analytical insights into different trends you're seeing on the market. And when you start realizing that there's so much going on here that makes it so that these people are 10 moves ahead of you, it's not a fair market. What you're dealing with is not a fair market. This is just an example of how they cheat with themselves, not how they're cheating with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
it's huge. You can't continue to expect like, well, I can go back to life because life seemed to be pretty good before all this. But no, it's not. You're getting crushed.
You're getting, yes, whether you know it or not, you're getting crushed. And what's so interesting
Yep.
is like what I like about what's going on with this whole movement is like, okay, it didn't affect you back in the day, right? But it affects you now. Like, and it affected you the whole time. You just weren't aware of it. Now you're aware of it. And like,
Yeah.
now that you know what is going on, it's not like you can, you know, sure, maybe today you don't feel like it's affecting you, but what happens in the future, in 5 or 10 years, or your kids or whatever, and it's their time to trade and they're getting screwed over still, just like we are right now. Like there has to be some kind of change, and we have to start that change, and we can't wait for like the future, because next time, let's say something is gonna, you know, let's say if we didn't start those hearings with like Robinhood and stuff, we didn't make that noise. Now, you know, what stops them from doing it again and again and again and again? Now they're exposed, they're out, and they just they hopefully won't be able to do it again.
They don't have many places left to hide.
They don't have
honestly.
any, exactly. I love it. They don't have many more places left to hide, and that's what we're doing with Citadel, exposing them, the dark pools. You know, my boy Austin over here is just in the thick of it, going through these crazy documents that I can barely understand. You got to baby steps me through. So that's that. And that's that. Thank you so much, Austin, for bringing this on, man. I can't thank you enough. Thank you for walking us through it, guys. I know this is an extremely long video. I apologize about it, but you know what? It's important to know to be educated. We need to educate ourselves as best as possible. Okay. I appreciate all of you taking the time to watch the video. If you do like the content, please consider subscribing. Austin and I are going to continue to cover as much as we can about this. Austin actually have another idea, so I'm gonna talk to you in a second.
Sure.
But guys, that's what I have. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video. You guys have a great night. Make sure we're spreading this video. We need people to understand. We just need to get the information out there, and you know, we need the right person to hear it. And I think that we can make that happen, okay, with all the motion and all the noise we're causing. All right, guys, thanks again. Have a great day. Peace.